VAR killed us in the Premiership. That's who's important. We're the important people.
It's all about football culture, right?
Championship, you don't have the pauses. Goals given, everyone can enjoy it. Premier League needs this back in it.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Football Trending, the football show by Football Joe. Today I'm joined by Ben Hook, head of social media at Joe. I've got Joel Wilson. He's back from, where were you? Greece. Croatia. Sorry. No Ibi today. He is out in Mexico City playing in the Kings League, and he actually saved a penalty from the famous Totti yesterday, and we'll play the clip here.
Con il portiere, la rincorsa con il destro. Il tiro. Oh. Questa il portiere del Medaglia City.
Making one of the coolest men in world football look silly.
He's on another level. He's doing different things.
It's not a great pen.
He does slip as well.
He does slip. To be fair to him, yeah, he's John Terry.
It's a should save for me.
Yeah, do you reckon?
It's a should save.
Yeah, well, it's still a 50 gamble, no?
Yeah, look,
left or right.
Once he goes the right way, you should save.
You know, the second Ibby smiles at him before it was his.
He was gutted. I think Totti got man of the match, and he was like, "I made 12 saves."
What's happening there? Totti.
But look, the big story of this weekend is that Ben's Southampton are back in the Premier League.
Rishi Sunak's red in my eye.
Not on this fucking pod. Not on this pod. Not my pod. And that's why we have these shirts up around. And Ben was actually at the game.
I was.
How was it?
It was great. It was nervy. It was a nervy football match. From a Saints perspective, just from the start, we just looked like we wanted to frustrate them.
Yeah.
And then when we got the goal, the pattern of play didn't really change. Leeds didn't leave much space. We couldn't really get out. And but overall, I don't think I felt relief like that at full time. That was
The atmosphere did look good. I have to say, I think both sets of fans made it quite special.
And they were banging on the door last 15-20 minutes, weren't they?
They were. The volley as well. Was it Dan James who hit the bar?
Came on. He was very good when he came on.
So look, we had people down at the game, and the big question from our side was, there's been no VAR in the Championship this year, and obviously one of the big changes coming up to the Premier League is VAR is introduced. So we went to ask fans how they felt about VAR.
What's the average match day experience like for a fan in a league without VAR?
I prefer it. We actually got robbed against Southampton earlier on in the season. Ballymun was well onside. So it's the odd decision, but I think as a fan, I much prefer it without VAR.
Absolutely crazy. It's absolutely... The atmosphere is so much better. When you can celebrate a goal and know it's a goal, that changes the whole ground and the old experience. Yeah, VAR killed us in the Premiership. That waiting around, waiting for a result, it's no good. No good. We need it. If it's going to last, it needs to last in a different way and be more effective towards the fan. Because that's who's important. We're the important people, the fans, not the other side of it.
The money aside, I mean, Championship, to watch that is just unbelievable. You know, it's quick, it's fast. You get away with a lot of things as well, as VAR obviously picks up. So, and I think the VAR has made the Premier League a bit sterile, to be honest.
I'll be honest with you, it's funny you should say that, because having VAR when we were in the Premier League was weird, but then we had 3 years of it, so we got used to it. But we had games against West Brom, they score with a hand and the goal's given, you kind of go, okay, right, this is going to be a bit weird. But it comes back around, doesn't it? You know, we've had our own ones, offside goals that we've been allowed. Nanto's one more recently, offside, goal given. So it's balanced itself out.
I think VAR takes away those moments, like you saw with Coventry in the FA Cup semi-final. I think it takes away those moments of celebrating goals, obviously, and then it gets chalked off for some stupid decisions. So overall, I think it's been better. Hopefully today it's in our favour if it is used, for us, basically, for a decision. So, yeah.
So, Ben, you were at the game. Obviously, everything gets checked by VAR nowadays. Did it affect the game at all?
It was weird, actually, on Saturday. When was the final? On Sunday.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it did.
Okay.
But I think there was an element where actually they were being quite liberal with how much they used it. Like, there were a couple of tackles that flew in.
Yeah, there was one 50-50 where I was like...
I was looking at it, I was like...
Not so 50.
Love that.
I was looking at it, I was like, he could go... I think it was Flynn Downs was one of them. I was like, he could go... he could get sent off.
They both went in for it, full pelt, though.
But I think it is about the people that apply the technology, and actually they just let the players crack on with it. Both sets of players seem to be on the same page when it came to tackles like that are.
And no one wants to see a red card in a cup final, right?
But it was, and overall, because it was slightly, I think the key word in those answers that I find with VAR, like, the most frustrating thing is not necessarily the decisions. It is like sterile. It has sterilised the Premier League.
1,000,000%. You know, there is that instantly whenever Spurs score a goal now, I'm like, well, let's wait and see. And then they'll check it, you know, and the lines go on, and he's 2 or 3 inches onside, and you're sort of like, yay, great. Yeah. And I have to say, I've looked at other leagues with envy. Obviously, lower leagues in English football with envy at the way, you know, a couple of the fans spoke about there. They've had decisions go against them.
Pie-faced fuming about a decision in December, I think we played Plymouth.
Plymouth getting done by an offside that never was. And then a couple go your way. You know, the Leeds fan talking about, I think he said Nonto scored a goal recently where it does, and, you know, football fans will always feel aggrieved. All VAR has done has led to a absolute over-analysing of every single moment. You know, like that 50-50, no one's looking at it and going, so-and-so should have been sent off, so-and-so. They're just like, they both went in for the ball. Yeah. It is what it is. Well, I think we spoke about it before, but it's the way in which VAR is now implemented on the game. It was never supposed to be this this under the microscope, you know, surgical precision. Every single element taken down to slow motion, and really, there's been ways about how we can fix it. You know, do we go to a challenge system? Do we go to a system whereby it only intervenes on certain elements? But it's still about the people that run it, right? And that's the biggest issue. And as we're seeing, you know, on the vote whether it should be binned in English football, I think 3 of the big boys are already saying no. And I'm kind of with them in that if you're going to do it, just do it right.
It was like Klopp said in his in one of his final interviews when he was asked about it. He said the thing is, the system should work, but you can't overhaul in its entirety the people that are implementing it. And kind of in my mind, I've been vocal before that in theory it should work and it should be good for the game. But if you cannot overhaul the people that are doing it, then is it ever going to work properly? I don't know. Going
into the Premier League next season, if they came out and they said, look, actually, we want to reduce VAR's importance, I think that's the way that they should probably try and go, and just be like, we are not going to use VAR unless it's... and like, I don't know, there was a pro that came out and said, it might be Eric Dyer that said it, I can't remember, but basically said VAR should be scrapped for subjective decisions. So it's like...
But then what's the
subjective decision? I always think about the Ireland-France game.
Oh, the Henry handball. Yeah.
If anybody at that game being able to watch that decision in basically you could probably go on your phones in the stand and know that you've been cheated out of a result as an Irish fan.
Yeah.
So I always think I'm sure it's happened to Saints had a clear offside in a League Cup final a few years ago that was ruled out when it was onside. So I think they have to find a way of getting the decisions right when it's that level of incorrect. Where I think fans, and where the difficulty is where do you draw the line? That is actually the whole debate always comes down to and what I think they need to do is over the summer draw the line.
Well, that's the thing.
Absolutely cast iron. Yeah. This is what we will be making decisions on. If you think it's like a 50-50 penalty and it could be one way or the other, we won't even look at it.
I would love that, by the way. Yeah. And so that we take all of this slow-mo, did he touch him, didn't he touch him, bin all that off.
Yeah. I think that the laws of the game currently do not allow for that, so they'd have to make adjustments.
Changing the rules. Yeah. The rules have been manipulated so much over the last 3 or 4 years. Ever since they changed, the top dogs changed and they started making changes. The rules are so grey now. Especially with handball doesn't, it was intention was brought into it. Then there was from the t-shirt that's
from the cuff down.
From the cuff down. But then some players wear fucking under things that are the same colour, so referees can't see. It's just you've created a sport that's basically impossible to referee. Yeah. Look, okay, so Saints get promoted, and one of the big things that they're going to have to think about straight away is FFP. I think today, the Telegraph reported that Leicester's points deduction still not guaranteed, may be between 6 and 15 points, which could be a huge blow for their survival in the Premier League. And there's
that's with whoever the new manager's going to be.
And you saw this year Burnley, Sheffield United, and Luton all ended up coming back down. So we went to ask fans, how does a Championship team now survive with the new FFP rules?
Do you think these FFP, it's going to stop teams from doing sort of, not necessarily a Leicester, but sort of breaking into that mould, breaking the top 6? Or do you think actually in the long run this might help to sort of even out and balance the playing field a bit?
I personally don't think it will. I think the big clubs are always going to win in that, and they're never going to agree to the little clubs actually being allowed to invest. When they get a decent investor in their club, they're going to try to stop them to try to get into that big four. The one that are at the top there, they're safe. Or they feel as though they are.
It's a really good question, because the problem you've got is if you've got clubs that have got small stadiums and actually they can only generate so much income off it, that makes it really, really challenging, because you want to spend more money with wealthy owners, but if you're not bringing it into the club, that's where the problem is. So I think you're going to find that clubs over the time, if they do go up with those challenges, they'll be really working on their social media presence, that global brand bit, because at the end of the day, that's the only way you're going to do it. Leeds are very fortunate. If we go up today, that's a massive if. We're going to have a 40,000 stadium. We'll probably be filled out each week in, week out. They've got the global branding, that allows them to spend more. But you're right, I think eventually it will bring the golf down, but it's hard to feel like that right now.
If it's brought in correctly and it's used wisely, then it makes sense, right? But if teams are going to abuse it and not get punished, then what's the point?
Some interesting answers. The guy in the brown shirt talking about how smaller clubs with smaller stadiums where you rely on those match day earnings, if you don't have a stadium that's 30, 40, 50,000 people, you're only going to earn so much. You can only bring in a certain level of talent. And so are you somewhat doomed from the start? I mean, you're going up, Ben. Do you feel doomed from the start?
Yeah. Overall, yes. Yeah. I think it's really difficult because if you don't look at the the clubs that came up last year and have gone down, you even look at like the sort of question there was about breaking into that top 6.
Sure.
If you look at the last 10 years, the crisis, well, even this season as a sort of single one, is Chelsea and Man United have been your sort of crisis clubs throughout this season, where their form has been awful in comparison. But you have sort of examples of really well-run clubs and semi-established Premier League clubs like Brentford and Brighton, who are the sort of example of like this sort of, you don't need a big budget to compete at the top. They're nowhere near these crisis clubs. Like United have won a trophy and finished where? Like, eighth?
It's the worst ever Premier League finish.
Yeah. Chelsea finished 6th in the end,
and go into the Europa Conference League.
Yeah. For Southampton coming up, we've been a well-run club in previous years. Sort of
long period.
League. Then we've had sort of problems off the pitch and sort of investment that didn't go right.
Yeah.
And it seems like now we seem to have sort of got the right mix again. I have absolutely in my head, I do not think we will challenge anywhere near the top half of the Premier League next season. I just can't see it. I think we've got good players. As a squad, we've got relatively good proven Premier League players in certain positions, but we just won't be able to spend, like we're signing Adam Lallana again, which is, as a nostalgia thing, I love, but we're not going to be able to go out and buy sort of properly proven Premier League talent that kicks us on for a number of seasons unless we go and do what Forest did. I mean, Forest went to the nth degree with it, but even like Leicester getting caught, everyone is sort of Everton, but there's also a part of me, it's like money doesn't guarantee the success. Like
no, it
Everton
doesn't.
and United are proving that it doesn't necessarily mean kicking on, but yeah, I don't have too much hope.
And teams change massively anyway, don't they? When you are promoted from the Championship to the Premier League, it's inevitable that there is going to be a lot of activity one way or the other. Do you anticipate that you are going to offload a lot of your best players?
Nah, I don't think we will. It's weird. I think we've got...
How can you? You need them.
Yeah, because going up from the Championship doesn't really add too much value to our players that are under contract. So apart from some of our younger players, but with Saints it's quite specific, where all of our younger players are actually either loan players or we've just signed them. So I think we're a bit of a different case. With Ipswich, I don't necessarily think that if you went and looked at like Sam Morsey and like their squad, maybe a couple of the younger lads that have really kicked on, like Omari Hutchinson has probably added to his value by kicking on in the Championship. But you don't necessarily add too much value to your existing. It's just like they've done it in the Championship. They need to prove themselves in the Premier League. So yeah, I do find it a bit hopeless. And like, I felt like this when Saints started to drop off from like 5th, 6th under Pochettino and Koeman. We'd done it on a really small budget. We were sort of the first team that had properly gone after like a scouting model, buy cheap, sell on, go again, like Brighton and Brentford are doing now. And I was a bit like, we're never ever going to break into that top 6 of trophies because it's so hard, unless we sort of sell our soul as a club and go huge on spending, Saudi owners. And I just I didn't necessarily want that to happen to my club. So I'm relatively happy with Premier League existence, but it sort of comes, I do think that money comes at a price to the soul of your club as well. So I think you're almost in a bit of a no-win overall, apart from unless you can be content with 10th to 15th in the Premier League, like sort of, yeah, a few of the clubs are now.
It is a fair question, especially after the 3 clubs going down. And, you know, a lot of people enjoyed watching Luton. A lot of people there was a lot of high hope around Burnley, although a sense of naivety that they never worked out. And then obviously there's the chat around Sheffield United having to sell Ndiaye and Sander Berg.
Yeah.
Although they did sign a lot of players, and it's a fairly poorly run club. I mean, I think last year you were talking about there was a talk of administration earlier on. You know, they were 16th when Heckingbottom took
I don't
over.
necessarily think the 3 clubs that have come up
are a great example.
Because this is the first time this has happened
in a while. Since the no, but that's what I mean. Are we seeing it now? Like Leicester coming up with the points deduction, and
I think Saints are actually staying up, to be fair.
I worry about Ipswich doing what Burnley have done as well. And look, I think your point there is really relevant. And we obviously, the question there was about breaking into the traditional top 6, but even breaking into the traditional top 12 now, right? Like Crystal Palace,
consolidating as
Brighton,
a
like
team.
Those teams know that they are looking for that sort of 8th to 13th position. And they're very established. They're good teams. And they've got brilliant players. And we're talking about, well, they're never going to push on. Because how do a team like Crystal Palace invest and not lose Elise and Eze and people like that? I think, even as a fan of a top 6 club, you know, I've supported Spurs all my life. I don't have any, like next season, we're not going to win the Premier League.
The whole financial picture of the Premier League has shifted so dramatically from even probably about 5 to 10 years ago, where to now break into it, like you sort of look at the underdogs of the top 8, Villa are spending huge amounts of money. Newcastle are bankrolled by basically the same sort of people that have bankrolled City. United are the single biggest club in the world and have spent more than anyone in the last 10 years.
Arsenal have spent, what, 700
million?
Huge.
It's a chasm, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just like, what is the ambition of the club, and do you have the cash to basically build on that? And so a lot of fans, myself included, have started looking down the pyramid for alternatives to sort of, because the Premier League does feel kind of, I'm not being over the top here. The Premier League, City have won their 4th in a row, but it doesn't feel like when Man United did it. For whatever reason, it doesn't feel like when Man United did it. I guess because Man United would still lose some games along the way. But there's a lot that the Premier League can learn from the EFL, and it won't because of hubris. But there's a lot that they could. So we asked fans, what's one thing that they think that Premier League could learn from the Football League?
What's the one thing you think the Premier League could learn from the Championship?
It's all about football culture, right? A lot of clubs in the Championship have come up from sort of smaller places, and you get that real sort of like football feel. But I do feel for proper fans of big clubs. I know there's a lot of like United fans, Liverpool fans and stuff that are real hardcore, and they get a bad, rep from some people.
That's a really good question. I think the passion, actually, because the Championship, I don't want to keep going back to VAR. Championship, you don't have the pauses, goals given, everyone can enjoy it. Premier League needs this back in it. It needs this back in it. Everyone wants to be in the Premier League, and I think that's the thing. Everyone in the Championship really wants to get into it. But for us, it's just about just keeping that journey along, nothing specific, and enjoying the day, and hopefully we'll do it.
The Premiership, unfortunately, is about the big clubs, and at the end of the day, they're in a different league to the rest of us, and it would just be nice if it was a bit more comparable and we were all a bit more suited to one another. There's too many divisions in the Premiership.
It's a more competitive league in general. I know obviously sort of Leicester, Ipswich have been at the top for the majority of the season, but it's been quite close. I see you pushed them both all the way.
I believe the Championship is way more competitive. It's obviously it's a much more enjoyable experience when you're near the top and when you're winning and everything, but overall I think it's one of the best leagues in the world. So unpredictable.
So losing a bit more losing a bit more. It's basically what I said there with City. It does feel like a different beast. Arguably one of the best teams in the world, managed by the best manager in the world, with the never-ending bottomless pit of spending, which may come to bite him in the arse. What do you guys think as fans? What do you think when you look at the Football League? What do you envy about it?
The sense of community, without doubt. It's not that it's completely gone. The nature of huge increase in tourism and kind of match day tourism, ultimately it results in making a fuckload of money for the clubs that are full of tourists, and the more money that gets made, inevitably the more clubs want more of that. I don't know. I don't think it completely sucks the life out of it, but I look down the pyramid and I think the sense of community within clubs is a lot stronger. The way that clubs that react to their fans and kind of the overall experience that you get maybe seems a little bit more kind of united on that front.
Do you know what's really funny? When clubs do and brands do like new kits, they always lean obviously into the culture of the club, into the heart of the brand, blah blah. But what they're doing is they're selling that globally. So they're taking that fandom and marketing it. And then the club gives very little back to actually the reality of what that fandom is. That's all made by fans, like fanzines and blogs and podcasts. That's all run off people's time for the love of their own club. And I think you're absolutely right. I'd love to see that sewn together a little bit closer. Some clubs still do it really well. I'll be honest. Some clubs.
It's not everybody.
It's not everyone. And I think, like you said, tourism for clubs is genuinely a good thing. But it is it's a fine line, isn't it?
It's a paradox. It's selling community and togetherness while pricing during a season ticket campaign, while pricing a load of people that have built that atmosphere, built that community out of said atmosphere and community. It is paradoxical, and it is it's pretty. I often look at it and I think it's pretty low. Like, there are a few clubs that really index on it, and it's almost like, because that has always existed, it will always exist. And they might well be right, and they're just there's no change in it. But I think it's sad when you see it happen and you hear it, like Fulham's price rise. Like, there was a news story on BBC.
Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, there was a whole news story on BBC News about it where Fulham's is like $3,000 for their main stand, and it's like,
I've got a lot of mates who had Fulham season tickets who are just not renewing.
But I lived there when they were building it, and I know someone in the ticket office who shall remain nameless, and they were like, the take up has been atrocious because all the locals are literally
because who can afford it? We're in a cost of living. It's so naive to just be like, we're in a cost of living crisis. Here's this new structure that you probably. The thing is, most people, they put money aside to afford their season ticket, right? It's not like just like a flippant decision. Like, I've got £1,000 spare. It's a big decision. That's a big expense out of people's pay packets. And to be like, you can afford double that, can't you? It's disgusting. And it really just shows the naivety. And also, we spoke about this before, the business of football and the reality of what happens on the pitch. They don't touch.
Fulham charging $3,000. Mate, you've been a Premier League club for like 3 years. Like, you might be in West London and it might be a lovely ground, but you're only a shit season in a competitive league away from being in the Championship and halving your attendance.
Do you know what the irony is as well? What will happen is the atmosphere will get worse because it will be only a certain amount of people who can afford it, or more tourism is needed to fill the empty seats. And then there'll be a whole campaign of how can we make the atmosphere better. They'll spend ages, the marketing team, the teams in will be like, how can we do we need fan noise pumped in? Do we need this, that and the other? And the reality is, if you keep those people that built it in the first place, if you keep those people happy, and you sort of do a banding of how expensive you make the tickets, you can keep your atmosphere really good and keep the sort of soul, while also having large swathes of, no one doesn't want tourism at their club. It's good for your club's brand, but the reality of outpricing people is the
one thing that I hope this independent regulator that has been spoken about for a long time and we seem quite close to, the one thing that I really hope that they bring in is like almost like a national heritage sort of style protection, where it's right, we talk about football clubs as community hubs, like heart of the community, like the lifeblood, and that is spoken about, but at their core they are private companies looking to make profit. And they can coexist, but it needs to be more heavily regulated. That needs to be set in writing that you have an obligation to your community. You are responsible for not just taking from them, because that's not what being the heart of a community is. No. It's pumping it around. It's pumping the blood around the community and giving it life. I think talking about this when it comes to what the Premier League can learn from, I wouldn't even say the Championship is great at it. It's lower down. It is non-league
Bundesliga.
football. Yeah, and it's looking abroad as well and going, right, we are important as a community hub.
Yeah.
What can we do? And it's not just having a community foundation that probably does great work in the sort of coaching schools, etc. It is the actual action of the football club as a almost like a mental health hub on a Saturday. It's like, that's why people love it. There was a Spurs fan on BBC Breakfast this morning basically being like, I have no social life. He was like, my season ticket is my social life.
Yeah, exactly.
I go there on a Saturday, I have friends existing there, I make new friends.
Yeah.
And that is important and that should be protected.
Yeah.
And as much as tourism is great for football clubs, the role of a football club is that is the most important thing. It is giving purpose to fans, and it maybe didn't exist 100 years ago, but it has developed, so it should be protected. And I think it's sad when it's exploited rather than protected.
There you go. Football clubs do better.
Yeah,
and that's what we can learn from
I
the
also think
Championship.
chaos could help the Premier League.
100%. Look, I miss
too many good footballers.
I miss
fucking chaos.
There was a League Cup game this season, Chelsea versus someone at the Bridge. Maybe I can't remember who it was. And they kicked lumps out of each other because there was no VAR on the night. And it was such a good watch.
Yeah.
Because there was no like stopping and hoping and waiting. Ref made the decision, everyone moved on. And there was no like debate after. I'm sure there was in the pubs, but that's what it's there for. There was no sort of online furor about like, well, where was VAR? It was just like, okay, that's the decision, we move on.
It's him.
Yeah. And so look, we'll see. I mean, like, looks like they're going to vote against it. It needs to be overhauled, but there we are. Look, thank you so much for watching our show. That's what we've got time for today. Make sure to like, subscribe, get involved. And look, the Euros is around the corner. We've got the Champions League next week. We will be there. There's a few of us going. We've got the Euros.
It's not me.
We've got the Euros starting the week after. We will be there. And so, yeah, make sure to like, subscribe, and get in the comments. See you soon.